it came to a peak in his office one day when he grabbed me and tried to kiss me, and I pushed him off of me, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. He came at me again. He clearly didn't get the message. Most men, after one shove-off, would know it's a no. Came at me again, and the same thing. I pushed him away, and I went over by the door to get out. He looked at me and said, "When is your contract up?" I was very young. I was at the very beginning of my career there, still a reporter in D.C., working for Brit Hume and Kim Hume, and very green, but loving my time. And Roger took an interest in me early on. You know, I think, in fairness to myself, it wasn't all because he wanted to sleep with me. I think he understood he had somebody who was a lawyer, who, you know, had potential in this business that was unique, and that he really wanted to develop it because, above all, he was a capitalist. He wanted to make money. So he started to mentor me in a great way. He gave me so much good advice I still rely on and miss to this day. And we kind of became friends. He would have me to his house with his wife and with Doug for dinner, and we went many times, and I got to know him. And then he would make bawdy comments to me a lot, which didn't faze me. You know, I had come off 10 years of practicing law. Like I said, we were pretty raunchy in the law. Not quite this raunchy, but, you know, salty language. And I'm almost impossible to offend. I'm really hard to offend. I'm freaking Irish. We don't offend easy. So I don't know. I just kind of, I wasn't too fazed by the inappropriate comments about women's looks or this one slept her way to the top, this that kind of thing. I remember getting worried when he said, I'll spare this news anchor the identification, but he said, this anchor who I admired at another network was smart. She slept with her boss, and that gave her every opportunity she ever wanted. That's how she got to the top. And I remember being like, now that's different from just body. You know, that sounds like an invitation. Mm-hmm. And then there'd be more inappropriate comments about me. You know, the initial comments were just about, in general, like sexual. It's almost like how a groomer, you know, frankly, operates. Then he gets specific about me. And he said something about how good he thought I would look in my bra and panties. I was like, all right, now we're really over on thin ice. In no world is this okay talk between a boss, the most powerful man in news, and a first-year reporter. You know, I remember thinking this is so ballsy because he knows I'm a lawyer. He knows I just came off of 10 years of practicing law, including employment law. Like, this is definitely not kosher. But my feeling was he just wanted to have an affair with me. You know, I thought the guy was Randy, you know? I wasn't thinking he's this massive sexual harasser. It just wasn't even, that's not at all how I experienced it. I'm like, he wants to go to bed with me. And not to sound, you know, self-congratulatory, but he wasn't the first man to behave like this around me. It wasn't like this is the first time a man's ever come on to me and wanted to have sex with me. So I was like, oh, this is tricky because he's my boss. I've got to get out of this. I'm definitely not going to have sex with him or an affair. This is very tricky. But my only goal was get out of it without hurting him because I want a career. Mm-hmm. You know, my career, which I'm loving, is on the line here. If I upset him or play this wrong, he's going to feel rejected, which is the worst way you can make a man feel. And if that man's your boss, your career's out the window, especially when you were me with no connections, no history, no resume, no body of work, nothing. So it was just like dancing on the head of a pin to try to just get out of bounds whenever he said something like that. Out of bounds, out of bounds, out of bounds. And for most of this time, I was divorcing Dan and not yet with Doug. So I couldn't be like, oh, you know, Doug, which is a very effective way of telegraphing to a man, no. But I didn't have that, and I didn't have a ton of experience in like just navigating this particular thing. So it was bad. But I did know that if he was going to fire me, I needed a record because I would have sued him. And so I started keeping a diary every night whenever I had an interaction with him, very detailed. I told my office mate, Major Garrett, who's the White House reporter for CBS News now, and he would later back me up when this investigation came down. We used to sit in my office. We shared an office together, and the phone would light up, and I'm a first year, and it would say, Roger Ailes. He'd be like, he never got a call from Roger in his career there. Called me all the time. I'm like, oh my God. He kept calling me up to New York, which was also unusual. I would later find out, these long face-to-face meetings were unusual. And I called my lawyer. I called Jones Day. And they opened up a case file and created a conflict just in case he ever called them. So he couldn't hire them so they could represent me if I needed it. And then I told my supervisor, who I have chosen not to name in the DC Bureau, but I went to this person and I told them what was happening. And I didn't want this person, just to be clear, to run to human resources. I wasn't like, let's make a record. This is inappropriate. I was like, please help me. I want it to end and I don't want to get fired and I don't know what to do. And this person told me he's just an unhappily married man and he's a good man. And if you just stay down here in DC and ignore him, it'll stop. And that's exactly what happened. And I chalked it up to exactly what I was told. He's a good man, but an unhappily married man. And he was looking to have an affair and it wasn't going to be with me. And I kind of skipped the, crescendo of it all, but it came to a peak in his office one day when he grabbed me and tried to kiss me. And I pushed him off of me. It wasn't violent, it wasn't I'll have you. And I was like, no, it was just he tried to go for it. And I pushed him back. And I could smell alcohol on his breath. And he came at me again. He clearly didn't get the message. Most men, after one shove off, would know it's a no. He came at me again. And the same thing. I pushed him away and I went over by the door to get out. He used to lock the door when not just me, but women were in there. And he looked at me and said, when is your contract up? And it was soon. I remember telling him whenever it was up. And then he came for me a third time.
A third time?
Yeah. And I pretended to stumble off of my high heel. To get away from him. And I ran out the door. And I called my Jones Day lawyer in tears. I'm definitely getting fired. This is going to be a disaster. And that's when they opened up the case file and did all that stuff. But ultimately, I did what, my friend and supervisor told me to do. And he did. He didn't pursue it, and he did not exact any sort of retribution on me. He got past it. He ignored me. I was a peon. And I just nose to the grindstone for the next couple of years down there. A couple years went by and he promoted me to anchor. The long meeting stopped and I got the anchor job. I was earning my bones that time. I was doing really solid reporting on big, big cases. So it wasn't oh, gee, nothing happened and then he gave me, I worked and I was getting well known and there was buzz. I was coming up. And then he made me an anchor. And he never bothered me again. Never. He was always the perfect gentleman with me after that. He had gotten the message. He still was bawdy here and there, but never about me. He clearly, and then I was with Doug and he was always respectful of that.
When did you become aware of all the other women?
So I found out that my closest friend there, Janice Dean, she's the meteorologist, also had an experience with him. And we kind of laughed. We weren't thinking he was this massive harasser. We were like, oh, men, And it was right at the same time mine happened. So I filed that under, took a shot with her too. Didn't work out with me, took a shot with her, didn't work out with her. Her story always, made me laugh because he took her out for a job interview at a hotel and, not a hotel room, but in a restaurant. And they had a glass of wine, and before she knew it, he was reaching out to hold her hands across the table, which is a weird move on a job interview. And he said to her, I need to know how you see me. And Janice, who's just the best, was like a teacher, like a mentor. Anyway, we used to laugh about that story. It was like, these pervy old men. That was the file it was in.
So this is like similar to getting heckled at the nursing home.
Yeah, it's like harmless. Okay. Well, once I got past my thing, which was definitely not harmless, it had the potential to do a lot of harm. It was like, all right, it's done. I managed it. I don't want to make a federal case out of it at all. And neither did she. She wanted her job. He offered her a job. She rejected him. She had the same experience. She rejected him, and he hired her anyway, and then left her alone. So we both had it in the file of he took a shot, it didn't work out. That happens. It's not supposed to happen in the work exactly with the boss, but it does happen. And then Gretchen Carlson filed her lawsuit. And we were like, holy shit. I mean, that truly was a bombshell. And that all hell broke loose. I mean, just that lawsuit was a before and after moment. All hell broke loose.
How long was the lawsuit going on before you made your decision?
I don't remember. I don't remember the time span. I mean, the whole thing seemed to be maybe 6 weeks, but don't hold me to that.
Were you close with Gretchen Carlson?
Not at all. I didn't really like her.
Okay.
A few of us did. And in a war between Gretchen and Roger, we were all Team Roger. That's just the truth. She didn't really like me either. So the instinct was not in any way to help her. But truth is truth. Like, reality is reality. And while I offer no opinion on her situation and what did or did not happen between Gretchen and Roger, I knew from the second that thing was filed that if I got called in by any investigative body, he was fucked. Because by this point, I had risen to the top of Fox News. I had credibility. I had no axe to grind. She had just been fired. And I knew that they would believe me. And I deserved to be believed. I just saw that this thing had set wheels in motion that were ultimately going to end in calamity. And, God, it was terrible. It was just terrible because I didn't want to hurt him and I didn't want to help her. And I didn't want to upend my career. And I didn't want to be known as the face of some sexual harassment movement or lawsuit, or to have the fact that I'd been harassed broadcast to anybody. I was humiliated about it. It wasn't something that was seen the way it is now. It was, usually they'd say you brought it on yourself. Back then. Only now are we starting to understand, actually, this is really kind of common and it doesn't mean you were asking for it. Trust me, I was not asking for it. I just didn't want anything to do with it. It was like cesspool of toxicity over there. My life's going pretty well over here. I don't want to go in your pool. But one thing after another started happening. And what happened was I found out that they were going to limit the investigation to only staff that worked for Gretchen. And I found that out after other women had spoken to either me or Janice. So like once the lawsuit was filed, women started talking. Me too, me too, me too. And so Janice and I started to hear this was widespread. This was not just the two of us. And heard it had happened to like some young women. And these were deeply concerning things. And we were like, oh my God. And then other women, non-Fox women, came out and spoke, I think, to Gabe Sherman in a piece that was explosive about terrible allegations they were making about him before Fox News. So we were all like, oh my God. And now I'm reevaluating everything that happened to me. And Janice reevaluating everything that happened to her. And then we found out that Roger had managed to limit the investigation to just Gretchen's staff. And that was the real moment of reconciliation for me, because I knew that would end it. That would have ended it, and he would have been fine. They would not have talked to Janice. They would not have talked to me. They would not have talked to the other women we now knew about. And I knew women not only at Fox, but at CNN, like elsewhere, who had worked for him at this point. And it's just, I betrayed him. And that's how I see it.
You still feel like that? No matter where you're watching Sean Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.